Bye-bye, cyclist. Quiet. Wait, is this on? Okay. It wasn't that long ago that if you wanted to be a bit cutting edge and drive an engineless car, your choices were limited to one of these, or more realistically, one of these. Thankfully, just 1 year after the iMav came out, this thing did. Phew. Spacious, practical, decent battery range, and most importantly, quite normal. The original Leaf made the electric car not only feasible, but acceptable. And so over the last 8 years, it's become the world's best-selling electric vehicle by absolutely gigawatts. That's partly because in all this time, there's still nothing that's really matched it directly. Sure, there are plenty of electric cars now, but they're either really expensive, or quite small, or just shameful. And actually, the two cars that do give you a proper like-for-like hatchbacky alternative to this, namely the Volkswagen e-Golf and the Ford Focus Electric, well, they're quite expensive one trim only jobs. Whereas this not only has trim levels you can choose from, unlike the Golf and the Focus, it's been designed as an electric car from the outset. Which in theory means it should deal with the unique architecture required for an electric car better than both. Yeah, the thing about the electric Golf, for example, is that aside from the drivetrain, it feels exactly like a regular Golf in every other way, i.e., brilliant. Take away the electric drivetrain in this though, and you're left with a family hatchback that ranges from depressingly average to not quite good enough, to be honest. Main thing, driving position. It is absolutely You sit far too high in the cabin because the seat is placed on top of the battery, on a plinth basically. And that means that the steering wheel feels far too low and there's no reach adjustment, so it's kind of sat on top of your knees. And so because of how high you're sat and the fact that the windscreen's quite shallow, the rear view mirror becomes a massive blind spot. And the A-pillars are really thick too, so actually visibility is quite poor. Then the cabin in general, which just hasn't moved forward that much from the original Leaf, and even that looked a bit dated when it came out in 2010. If you've been in a first generation Leaf, you'll immediately notice how many of the parts are carried over, as is the overarching sense of drab greyness. There's a lot of space front and back, headroom and legroom, but
200 yards, speed camera.
I know there's a speed camera there. I never speed anyway, so it doesn't matter. But it feels cramped because of the poor driving position and this sort of sense of oppressive darkness. Glove box is quite big though. The boot's bigger by a few litres too, which is good obviously, but even it's frustrating because the drop down to the floor is massive. And the step between the floor and the back of the seats when you fold them down is like that, which is really frustrating when you're trying to load big, heavy things. And the thing is, none of this is stuff you'd have to deal with if you bought an e-Golf or a BMW i3. They're cars with their own unique sense of excitement, you know? In the Golf's case, that comes because of the fact that it's a normal Golf in every sense apart from being electric. And the i3 is just mental in a good way because it looks and feels at all times like you're driving the future. Still, from in here, it looks and feels like you could be driving a Nissan Almera. But there is redemption. Drivetrain, it's very, very good. When the first Leaf came out, it looked like this. The battery was improved in 2016 to give you a few more miles if you wanted, but the performance didn't change. Compare that to today's Leaf and you'll see there's been significant improvement in all areas, apart from top speed. But look at the 62 time for a start, but even better, look at the range, which goes some way to preventing the dreaded battery's gonna run out, battery's gonna run out, battery's gonna run out. Yep, range anxiety. But come on, 235 miles? Surely that's absolute It is! However, Nissan has been kind enough to test the Leaf using the altogether more real-worldy and soon-to-be obligatory WLTP test. And on that basis, the Leaf will do this. Thing is, even that's Actually, that's harsh. You won't quite make that, but you won't be too far off. I ran this particular car for 4 days and a good 110 miles before the battery dropped to about 20% and I felt the need to plug it in. And that was mixed driving too, obviously. Professional road tester. What I'm saying is that the battery does make a big difference now because it makes the Leaf more realistic for more people. Honestly though, the drivetrain of this thing is a real highlight. For a start, it's really quick. It's difficult to convey how responsive this thing is. The last Leaf would sort of die after 30 or 40 miles per hour. This just keeps going right until you hit the top speed. I assume never gone past 70 in it. 50 to 70 in particular is really impressive. This in most ways retains the characteristics of the original but just improves on them substantially. So whereas the last one dealt with potholes like Boris Johnson dealt with small children on a rugby field, this one's more like takes the edge off a bit. It feels that bit softer generally, but it is that without resorting to having terrible body control around the corners. And actually, it's a lot less frumpy feeling in general. It handles a lot better. It turns in that little bit sharper. Main thing that you'll notice though is the pedal feel, which is much improved. In this car's normal mode, the brakes do feel much more progressive. They're much easier to modulate. That's really important when you're going around town, which is what this car's really designed for. Plus, Nissan has added something called e-pedal. It essentially means that the right pedal acts as both your accelerator and your brake. Now, you'd assume that the e-pedal is mostly to do with maximizing the battery life, because when you lift the pedal, you're getting this really strong brake energy capture effect. But Nissan actually markets it as a convenience feature. Call it one pedal driving. And they reckon that 90% of the time you're in town, you won't need to use the brake when you've got e-pedal on. Who needs the stress of having to move their foot between two pedals? But one particular inconvenience that remains with the Leaf is the whole charging thing, because the improved battery still hasn't crossed the Leaf into the realms of a go anywhere sort of object. It will charge to 80% of its capacity in about an hour or so with a quick charging thing, but that hardly makes it a long distance car, does it? Other than that, you're looking at 7 to 8 hours for full charge with a 32 amp wall box, or closer to 20 if you're just plugging it in next to your iPad. But whichever way you charge it, you're looking at less than £4 from empty to full, which will buy you about 3 litres of diesel. Have a think about how far that'll get you. And elsewhere, it's actually a very alluring buying prospect too. I mean, for a start, it looks much nicer than the frumpy original, but more objectively, it's been endowed with a 5-star Euro NCAP rating.
Voila! What a video!
Firstly, because it performs well when it comes to the basics of hitting stuff, but also because it has stuff like ProPilot, which is autonomous driving technology by another name. It keeps you in lane on the motorway and it'll manage the throttle in traffic jams too, which does make heavy traffic that bit less vexing. And believe it or not, it's a bit cheaper than the outgoing Leaf once you've taken away the government grant, which at the moment is £4,500, and you don't pay VED still, and if you live in London, you don't have to pay the C charge, and the battery is guaranteed for longer than you're likely to have the car, assuming you buy it new. And when it comes to trim, the basics are there from the bottom rung, so you don't necessarily have to spend big on one of these, even though you can. And ultimately, I still think that for the majority of people doing the majority of boring day-to-day driving to work and that, the electric car experience is much more enjoyable than the conventional one. The quiet responsiveness and not having to go to the fuel station, and just generally being part of the minority and part of something that feels different and futuristic. And that's why, even though there are quite a few things that I don't like about this Leaf, I'd still recommend one quite strongly to anybody that can make it work for them. But not before making them try a BMW i3. Now that is an electric car. Thanks for watching. More on this and other cars, electric and non-electric, over at HJ.co.uk as usual. The full address is HonestJohn.co.uk. Please leave a like and share and comment. We do like reading all your stuff, and we'll see you soon. Bye.